Crown of Thorns and Desire. Previous episodes are available on playlist. A link is given in the video description. Episode 5. His voice sounded behind her. She turned around abruptly, but he had not entered the room, this damp, moldy basement. He stood outside the iron door, and fortunately, the door opened low enough that she could only see his straight black coat and a row of golden buttons on his chest. She didn't have to see his face, nor did she have to let him see her unease. He stood outside her door like a vampire, rigidly and helplessly adhering to the rules of the game between vampires and humans. No matter if the door was open, he could not step into this room without the owner's invitation. Can you remain silent? But she was very clear in her heart that even if he retracted his fangs, this demon would always need to drink blood to survive, even if his next words were so gentle and pleasant. You don't need to hide from me, I won't force you to do anything. She did not respond, sensing that her silence would invite terrible consequences. He had always been duplicitous, saying he didn't care, wouldn't force her, but later would retaliate even more harshly. This time, the outcome was unexpected. He still stood outside the door, not stepping into the room, calmly saying, "Well then, it's up to you." She stood frozen in place, not moving for a long time. She did not understand why it had come to this, what he was planning to do. She had clearly defied his request by moving out of the attic room and coming to the basement. He knew she was hiding from him and was still resisting him with silence. Would he really not hold it against her, or was he just maintaining a facade of calm while brewing a greater storm behind the scenes? The third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, a week passed. The big house was very quiet everywhere. During the day, there was not a trace of his presence in the air, and she could no longer hear the sound of his military boots on the floor. Yet, there were clear footprints of his long boots on the floor, still carrying a bit of dirt. The small items on the storage table would occasionally change positions, and there were signs that the glass cups on the dining table had been moved. All of this clearly indicated that he must have come back. He was like a wandering soul, always returning to this house in the dead of night and quietly leaving before dawn. Kenyi lay in bed, her body aching from a day of hard work, but she only wanted to work desperately so that she wouldn't have time to let her mind wander. Yet, when she finally calmed down, she couldn't help but think. She didn't understand what he had been doing during those late-night returns, and where he hurriedly left to afterward. Perhaps he had a woman outside, or maybe he was sleeping at Ruth's brothel at night. If that were the case, what use was she to him? He brought her back just to find someone to vent, play with, and abuse. Several times he had restrained himself, but what was meant to come would eventually come. She closed her eyes, trying to fall asleep as quickly as possible. With her eyes closed, lying in bed, she did not see a black car quietly driving into the gate. Everything was happening silently in the dark. He arrived at the basement door, inserted the key into the lock, gently placed his gloved left hand on the door, and turned the right hand. The lock made a faint click sound as he opened the iron door, gently pulling it ajar. He first observed the room from outside, then bent down to enter. The light in the room was dim, the only illumination coming from the small lamp on the corridor ceiling outside the basement door. He did not turn on the light but walked lightly toward the sleeping girl on the bed. The girl lay with her back to the door, curled up. His ice blue eyes sparkled in the dim light as he could see her black hair scattered on the goose-down pillow. Her hair was smooth and soft, but upon closer inspection, it was a bit uneven. One particularly long strand of black hair hung down restlessly over the edge of the bed. Her body was soft and pliable, and her blanket only covered her waist. She wore a light pink short-sleeved nightgown, but her sleeping posture indicated that she was not very comfortable. She curled up as if resisting something, or perhaps afraid of being harmed. Her breathing was also uneven. He did not approach her any closer, standing 2 steps away, remaining still for a moment. "Good night, my sleeping beauty," he said, his voice very soft, as if only he could hear it, and at the same time, he slightly nodded to bid her farewell. She had her back to him, tightly closed her eyes, and a tear slid down her cheek, dripping onto the soft goose-down pillow. His footsteps gradually faded away. She suddenly sprang up from the bed, rushed to the half-open window, grasped the glass, and looked out into the yard. The black Mercedes had already started and was driving into the endless dark night. Kanye finally understood the truth about this midnight ghost. For an entire week, he had rushed back from the embassy of that country just to say good night to her while she slept, and then immediately left. He spared no effort in doing this, regardless of the cost. This round trip was a 10-hour journey. He always told her fairy tales, even though the previous stories were somewhat cruel, like Cinderella in crystal shoes dancing with the handsome prince, and now he was telling her another story, personally acting as a prince. She was his sleeping beauty, and this prince came to the bedside of his beloved princess every night. This prince was even more affectionate than the one in the story, even reluctant to disturb the princess's peaceful slumber, despite his deep desire to kiss her awake. Kanye did not know why he could transform from a ferocious demon into a tender prince in an instant, but she was clear that she could not escape. She had to fulfill her promise to stay by his side until the day he wanted to end it. She couldn't even choose death, no matter how he treated her. This time, it seemed he was casting a vast black net around her, aiming to ensnare her soul. But regardless of whether the story was mad, cruel, beautiful, or enchanting, it was ultimately just a story, a fairy tale told to little girls. She was no longer a little girl and would not be easily deceived by this beautiful facade. That day, he returned very early, before the sun had set. He walked through the door in the glow of the sunset and saw her bent over cleaning the leather sofa in the living room. He took off his hat and hung it on the coat rack, standing at the door, and said to her, who was busy with her head down, "Tonight, there is a concert. Would you like to accompany me?" Kanye's hands stopped, still with her back to him. She clearly remembered that the day after he brought her to this house, he politely invited her to a ball. That please had no meaning of respect. Now his tone had softened a lot, but it still made her unwilling to accept and unable to refuse. She remained silent, and this silent reaction was taken by him as consent. "We'll set off in an hour," he said, and then he quickly walked up the stairs. She also walked back to the basement, changed into a black plaid skirt, and stared at herself in the mirror. The skirt was a bit loose because she had become even thinner than before. Her complexion was too pale, her lips cracked, devoid of any color. She instinctively pressed her lips together. When she was studying in America, girls liked to dress up and happily attend balls with boys. She had attended such gatherings, but she always went barefaced, never using any cosmetics. Back then, her complexion was rosy, radiating the glow of youth. Now, she looked as pale as a wandering soul and clearly could not go out like this. Suddenly, she remembered that Irina had given her a lipstick, which she seemed to have casually put into her handbag. She rummaged through the dark red small bag, took it out, twisted off the cap, and applied it to her lips in front of the mirror. A pale face with lips as red as flowers looked even more jarring. She tore off a bit of tissue and wiped away the sticky residue from her lips. He was already waiting for her in the hall. He wore a black formal suit, specially tailored for social occasions by the SS. He had many clothes in his several wardrobes, so many that they were overwhelming, but the vast majority had never been worn. She had once diligently fulfilled her duties as a maid, taking them out one by one to wash and iron them. He saw her dark eyes resting on his knees, a smile appearing at the corners of his lips. "This is the seasonal formal wear. Although I don't like changing clothes, as it wastes too much time, I can't let the superior's kindness go to waste, right? Can you remain silent?" She recognized this outfit, tailored for him by the royal tailor with a white wig. She couldn't help but admire again how skilled that tailor was. The clothes fit well, were neat, and looked sharp. However, his expression seemed a bit haggard. She knew he had been returning to this house every midnight for a week and then immediately rushing back to the embassy, like a transport driver shuttling between two countries at night. He not only enjoyed torturing others but was also a masochist himself. Only a masochist would commit suicide like that without sleeping all night. He stepped forward, took her hand, and walked out the door. The driver had already brought the car to the entrance. He opened the car door for her, and as she sat inside, he held onto the car roof, bent down, and said to her inside the car, "The color of your lipstick is beautiful." Kanye frowned, instinctively bringing her hand to her lips. The lipstick she had just applied was not very clean, leaving a thin layer of light pink mark. The car arrived at the theater entrance. He gentlemanly opened the door for her, unceremoniously linking his arm with hers. Kanye was pulled out, and she saw another car approaching. The door opened, and a tall officer stepped out, also displaying gentlemanly manners as he opened the door for the lady sitting in the back seat. A girl in a black evening gown supported his arm as she emerged from the car. Kanye recognized the man. He was the one who had shown great interest in her at his promotion banquet. She quickly lowered her head, hiding behind him, because that steel-gray gaze, even seen through glass lenses, shot towards her from afar, sending chills down her spine. "Philip." He pulled her forward quickly, greeting an old friend. "Ryan, I never expected to see you here. I thought you would stay at the base." "You have to let me have a weekend," he chuckled, his gaze falling on Philip's companion. "And this beautiful lady is?" Kanye stared at her in a daze. This was an Eastern girl with black hair and black eyes, dressed very ladylike, but the mischievous glint in her dark eyes revealed that she was actually just a little girl. Unlike the other little girls she had encountered, she was not enchanted by Ryan's godlike handsomeness. She merely tilted her head to glance at his face and then lowered her eyes, curiously studying Kanye. Kanye was equally surprised to see an Eastern girl here. Philip smiled as he took her hand, introducing her with a tone of pride. "This is my assistant, Annabelle, a PhD in forensic science from the University of Munich." "Hello, I'm Annabelle. May I know you?" The girl blinked, her voice sweet and clear, spoken in African. Clearly, she was completely ignoring the two men, speaking directly to Kanye. "Kanye. Kanye," she murmured in response, secretly astonished. She had only just noticed that the girl was Eastern, not realizing she was also from South Africa. African people were very rare here, and she hadn't expected someone so seemingly delicate and young to already be a PhD in forensic science at the University of Munich. No wonder she could stand so calmly, elegantly, and confidently beside this terrifying Nazi official. Philip did not look at Kanye again, and the two men continued their conversation. "Ryan, you don't look too well. Smoke less, and stop drinking, it's not good for you. Do you want me to live like you, relying on chocolate for sustenance?" he replied with a smile, lowering his head to remove his gloves, which he clenched in his left hand. "You really are responding positively to the Führer's call, getting all the soldiers in the Empire to put down their cigarettes and chew chocolate. I'm doing it for your own good." Philip stared at his nose, leaning in slightly, his fingers tapping on the eagle insignia on his chest. "Don't forget, excess in drink and pleasure harms the body." With that, he took his companion's arm and stepped into the auditorium. Kanye gazed at their retreating figures. The officer was tall and broad-shouldered, while the girl had a slightly plump figure but a slender waist, looking like a cheerful little bird beside him. She turned back to glance at Kanye, offering a faint smile like a delicate lotus flower. Encountering someone from her homeland in a foreign land, Kanye wanted to return the friendly smile, but she was being held by his hand and couldn't manage to smile. "We should go in too." He tightened his grip, holding her hand firmly. This is an aria from Puccini's opera Turandot, Nessun Dorma. He slightly tilted his head, whispering in her ear, then straightened up, focusing on the stage. From the moment they entered, he held her hand. After sitting down, he laid his palm flat, palm up, allowing her hand to rest gently and naturally on his. He wasn't wearing white gloves, and the warmth of his palm could directly penetrate her skin, reaching her body. On stage, a tenor was singing a passionate aria. Nessun dorma. Nessun dorma. Even you, princess, must anxiously watch in your cold chamber the starlight that flickers with love and hope. But the secret is hidden in my heart, no one knows my name. When dawn shines upon the earth and kisses you, that's when I will reveal it to you. With my kiss, I will unlock this secret, you will marry me. Begone, night. The stars are falling, the stars are falling. Victory at dawn. Victory. Victory. This story is adapted by Puccini from 1001 Nights. This Italian playwright is undoubtedly a genius, but he does not understand African culture, he merely borrowed an Eastern sentiment, which is just an exotic flavor in the eyes of these Europeans. The center of this play is redemption, where a passionate prince saves the fallen soul of a princess with his selfless love. They sat in the middle, close to the front row, undoubtedly one of the best spots in the entire venue. Around her were Nazi officers in crisp uniforms and their fashionably dressed companions. Not far away, General Philip squinted his grey eyes, gently patting the back of the beautiful dark-haired girl's hand. The girl smiled brightly, turning her neck like a lark to look back at the stage. He leaned in and whispered something in her ear, his left hand lightly adjusting the silver frame of his glasses, his gaze seemingly brushing past Kanye. She quickly lowered her head, avoiding the scrutiny of that grey gaze. This was a special performance for them. On both sides of the stage hung enormous red devil symbols. Everything proceeded according to their order. The man sitting to her left was so handsome, almost unbelievably so. From the side, his nose appeared even more prominent, and his ice blue eyes were deeply set in their sockets, seemingly entranced, with shimmering waves reflecting in his ocean-like blue pupils. Her hand, though merely resting on his warm palm, felt as if it could directly touch his soul. He spread his palm, exerting no pressure on her, but the immense desire emanating from his soul seemed to pull her hand, dragging her into an unfathomable abyss. She couldn't control herself, feeling like a dove, her body swaying and gliding in the air with the music. Her underdeveloped wings were too tender to bear the weight of his soul's desire and the gravitational pull from the depths. In this drama, the soul of Princess Turandot would be saved by the prince. Did his soul still harbor a shred of goodness? Could one truly drop the knife and become a Buddha in an instant? Could a sinful soul really be redeemed by light? No, he chose darkness and degradation. If he could truly be redeemed, then his name wouldn't be fascist, nor would it be devil. The singer on stage had reached the climax, the resounding high notes shaking the entire venue. This was a singer she greatly admired, yet now she couldn't absorb a single note. Because all night long, she had been conflicted about whether to withdraw her hand from his palm. As the song concluded, the audience erupted into applause, standing up in unison, the sound like thunder, orderly and resounding. He stood up as well, joining the applause for the performers, and her hand was finally liberated from this bondage. "I want to go outside for some air," she spoke before him, quickly walking out of the theater's hall, down the steps, and into the small square outside. It was now deep into the night, with only a few stars twinkling in the dark sky. Kanye took a deep breath of the cold air and heard a faint, weak voice coming from below her feet. "Lady, please buy a rose." It was a ragged little girl, looking frail, as if she had just crawled out of a tunnel. Kanye noticed the yellow six-pointed star badge on her chest. "Oh my, how are you selling flowers here? Please buy one." The girl repeated her words, her amber eyes looking up at her. She had no money on her, rummaging through her pockets, hoping to give the poor child a piece of candy, but she had no candy either. She glanced towards the theater entrance, where the neatly dressed audience members were coming out. She pushed the girl's delicate shoulder. "Hurry home, child, it's dangerous here. Please, kind lady, buy one. The shop is closed, my father was taken away, my mother is sick, and without money, she will die. What are the two ladies talking about?" His voice came from behind. The little girl instinctively felt a bit frightened by the tall, handsome man suddenly appearing before her. "Are you selling flowers?" He slowly crouched down to meet the girl's gaze, his ice blue eyes sweeping over the yellow star on her chest, landing on the broken basket in her hands. "The roses are beautiful, but today is not Valentine's Day, little lady." The girl didn't answer, just stared at him with her big amber eyes. In her tattered basket were a few roses, which must have been stolen from somewhere, as they were so uneven. "Sell them to me." He pulled out his wallet, finding no change, so he took out a bill instead. "Here, go home." "Thank you," the girl said, clutching the bill, placing the entire basket on the ground, and turning to run into the depths of the alley at the street corner. He didn't look at the little girl, pulling out the roses one by one from the basket, gathering them into a bouquet in his hand. She gazed at the blood-red roses in his hand. He didn't immediately hand the flowers to her but lowered his head and chuckled softly, "Isn't it quite pitiful that this girl is still selling flowers so late?" She continued to watch him, catching a glimpse of the little girl's figure disappearing into the dark street. The weight that had been hanging in her throat finally settled in her stomach. She let out a long breath, her eyes shimmering. She inadvertently glancing at the bouquet he held, she quickly looked away. It's not her fault, she's just a child. The fault lies with her parents, they shouldn't be Jews. He stood up, tilting his head as if sighing, but also deliberately speaking to her. Her gaze focused on his incredibly handsome face, staring at him in confusion. She couldn't understand his words. In his eyes, the little girl could be forgiven for her ignorance. But she didn't know what crime an ordinary grocery store owner could commit, or what crime an ordinary Jewish family could commit. Yet at this moment, she felt her heart grow heavier. She clutched the collar of her gown, as if the air outside was as oppressive as that inside the theater. Her obsidian-like eyes blinked rapidly, tears glistening at the corners. He stared at her, taking in every expression on her face, his ice blue eyes gradually darkening. Crack! A cluster of roses fell to the ground. The flowers were so fragile that the moment they touched the ground, the petals immediately shattered. He turned to leave, his black boots inadvertently crushing the delicate stems, further breaking them. However, Kenyi was too preoccupied to care about the fate of the flowers. She lowered her head and quickly followed behind him. The driver had already brought the car back to the residence. He sat directly in the front passenger seat, not even bothering to open the door for her. Kenyi opened the door herself and climbed into the back seat. The stern driver said nothing, quickly starting the car. On the way back, he didn't say another word, nor did he open the window as he usually did to let the night breeze in. The car windows were tightly closed, with no air circulation, and the atmosphere inside felt as if it had solidified. Kenyi found it somewhat difficult to breathe, knowing that this eerie silence always precedes a storm. The car drove steadily and quickly along the road, with dim yellow streetlights rushing by outside the window. Ahead lay an endless expanse of dark night. Her thoughts never ceased for a moment, recalling the events of the past few days. He had not forced her to do anything, nor had he shown any dissatisfaction with her stubbornness. His tolerance for her behavior bordered on indulgence, yet she distinctly felt a different, more intense kind of oppression. She could not bear the icy blue eyes watching her from the shadows. She could not endure the ghost that silently entered her room every midnight. She could not withstand the enormous black hand that seemed ready to pull her into the abyss of darkness. Innocently, she had become embroiled in this game of conquest and submission. Just as at the beginning, he smiled hypocritically, attempting to win her heart with gold, silver, jewels, and silks, much like a wolf pretending to be asleep. However, her steadfast resistance only enraged him, and thus his brutal, bloodthirsty nature began to reveal itself. This brutality escalated gradually with the intensity of her resistance. He was a wolf, just as his name suggested. Despite swinging from one extreme to another, giving her a false sense of security, a wolf would always remain a wolf, his essence would not change. But what was she to do? She could not choose death, nor could she control her own body. The only thing left for her to choose and grasp was her soul, along with the little dignity that remained. How much longer could she hold on? She clenched her hands tightly, her fingers cold, yet her palms still felt the warmth that came from him. The car arrived at the mansion, and he still did not open the car door for her. He simply exited from the passenger seat, leaping up the steps without looking back, pushing open the grand door, stepping into the foyer, and quickly ascending the staircase. She pushed open the car door, ran up the steps, and pushed open the front door of the house. Standing in the foyer, she saw his figure already at the corner of the second floor. "Wait," she called out to him. He suddenly stopped in place and turned to look down at her. His speed was too fast, she clearly had to jog to keep up with his pace. She wore a plain-colored dress, her skin pale and her figure slender. From this angle, looking up at him, her large, obsidian-like eyes appeared even clearer and more prominent. However, just before leaving the mansion, that charming pink hue on her lips had vanished, replaced by pallor. Her lips trembled slightly, and her chest rose and fell violently, as if she were summoning the courage to say something. He stood there, squinting, silently waiting for her to speak, his dark, elongated figure looming above, resembling a king ruling over all. She felt a bit fearful, but if she didn't speak the words that had been bottled up inside her, she would be driven mad by him. After a long pause, she finally spoke, "What do you want from me?" His voice rumbled like distant thunder above her head. The volume was not loud, yet it carried a tremendous sense of oppression. He did not answer her question but instead retorted with an imperious tone, "That's a question I should be asking you. What do you want?" Kanye did not expect him to respond in this way. Her dark eyes sparkled with a glimmering light as she gazed up at him from below. "Don't look at me with those eyes. If you still want to keep your eyes," he raised his voice, pointing directly at her head, threatening her viciously. Kanye did not heed his warning and continued to look up at him, her dark eyes showing no hint of fear or retreat. Suddenly, she felt an inexplicable, intense sensation. This time, his brutality was not entirely the same as before. It felt so weak and powerless. She steadied her emotions and spoke in a slow, low tone, "I cannot accept you. I cannot forgive you for being so cruel to me before. I cannot forgive the pain you inflicted on my body and soul. Not only that, but you also killed the innocent Dr. Harrison and the kind Charles. Your hands are stained with blood. You can kill me, you can continue to torment me, but do not expect me to forgive you or accept you. Give up on that." She tried to keep her tone calm, stating a fact rather than making an accusation. She spoke at length, but finally stopped. Compared to his angry shouts and warnings, she feared his cold laughter even more. He tilted his head back and chuckled a few times before looking at her again. "Very well, you are an angel, singing the praises of justice and hating evil. But you seem to have forgotten one thing, our agreement, my angel. It is time for you to fulfill your promise." The chill in his icy blue pupils made her instantly understand his words. She stood rigidly at the foot of the stairs, like a dove with broken wings, trembling and ready to be slaughtered. But this was the outcome she desired. She would rather be torn apart by his brutality than be ensnared by his tenderness. He descended the stairs step by step, gradually approaching her like a vampire, this bloodsucker long-starved. He spread his black wings, quickly enveloping her, his beautiful nose close to her neck, inhaling deeply. Her scent was so fragrant. He swept her up in his arms, her petite body felt so light, offering no resistance. She allowed him to carry her as he ascended the stairs. He laid her down on the bed. Her body was very stiff, but her hands tightly covered her chest. He spread her arms apart. His gaze suddenly froze, for on her heaving white chest was a black wolf tattoo. At that moment, he realized how much he truly desired her, an uncontrollable longing bursting forth from his blood. There was only one way to quell this desire. She kept her eyes closed, maintaining her arms spread wide, her legs tightly pressed together, resembling a figure crucified. She wanted to push him away with her arms, but her wrists felt as if they were bound by invisible shackles, unable to move at all. "No, please don't," she could not help but cry out. He saw her eyes tightly shut, tears glistening at the corners, struggling and trembling, for the first time showing such raw emotion in front of him. His fingers tangled in her black hair, stroking it gently, clearly feeling her shivering. Finally, he lightly curled his lips, yet did not laugh out loud. "Don't continue, or, don't stop." He breathed into her ear, mocking her, yet he had already ceased his assault. Yes, he had made one mistake, he would not make the same mistake again. He would not let desire dictate his will, relinquishing control to her. "Get out!" His voice was somewhat hoarse. The fire of desire, once ignited, was difficult to extinguish, but he managed to do so. Clearly, she was in a state of panic, curling up and rolling off the bed onto the floor. He propped his head up with one hand, lying sideways on the bed, a slight smile playing at the corners of his lips as he observed her embarrassment. Suddenly, as if sensing something, he raised his eyes to the tightly closed door of the room, instinctively pulling up the bed sheet to cover her. He quickly got off the bed, tidied his disheveled clothes, and pushed the door open halfway. Upon seeing the visitor, he was slightly surprised. This young man had great potential, but he was not as perceptive as Captain Jacob, who had followed him for years. "What is it?" The questioning gaze made the aide instinctively take a step back. "Sorry, General, I didn't mean to disturb you, but I must report something to you." He seemed disinterested in the aide's report, squinting his icy blue eyes, turning to watch her scramble to her feet and flee in a panic. He realized that his emotions were not as terrible as he had imagined. He glanced at the aide, who looked flustered, and he chuckled self-deprecatingly. "You really know how to choose the right moment to report." Please forgive me, I bring you good news." The aide paused slightly before continuing, "The mountain eagle has found the cat." "Is that so?" That's truly good news. He squinted, still smiling, but the warmth had vanished from his icy blue pupils. Kanye fled back to the basement, locking the iron door behind her. She didn't bother to get dressed, wrapping herself in a white sheet, and collapsed onto the bed, crying out loud. She had failed. This time, it was a complete failure. Although this logic always seemed absurd, the more she tried to maintain her mental independence, the more it had to be built on the ruin of her body. Just as she had actively offered her chastity to him, it was not a fall but a steadfastness. What had just happened made her realize that she was no longer as brave as before. At the moment when it was about to happen, she suddenly lost her courage and begged him for mercy. And he, surprisingly, had really let her go. Aside from pleading with him to release her arrested teacher, she vowed never to ask him for anything again. That time was a trade, although one life was exchanged for 12, which seemed inequitable. She accepted it with a clear conscience. Beyond that, she had never asked him for anything. However, just now, when she desperately pleaded for him to let her go, he had truly done so. Whether it was out of sympathy, pity, or some other reason, she did not want to feel any of those emotions. She cried for a long time, and suddenly a flicker of light in the yard stung her eyes. Looking out from the windowsill, she saw that the black car had started again, slowly driving into the darkness. She knew that tonight would be very quiet. Her status in this house was extremely special. She originally didn't have to work, but when she wanted to, no one stopped her. She had already gotten used to waking up early in the morning to wipe the floors and clean the rooms. When she arrived at the first floor hall, she found that the maid Abigail had gathered all the servants, as if holding a small meeting. In the center of the crowd was a new maid, and Abigail had already given a brief introduction, allowing the newcomer to get to know everyone. "Hello everyone, my name is Ross." The tall girl introduced herself somewhat shyly. "Carol." Kanye called out without thinking, hardly believing her eyes. This new maid was clearly her friend from Samuel Art School, the human model Carol, except that her hair color was brown. Carol's hair should have been golden. The tall girl didn't react, looking blankly at Kanye under everyone's gaze. Kanye stepped forward a few paces, scrutinizing her more closely. Yes, it was her. Aside from the hair color, this girl looked almost identical to Carol. Both were tall and beautiful, and their eye color was the same, a bright blue. "Ross, your room is on the first floor, follow me," Abigail said to the tall maid. "I'll teach you some of the rules here." "Yes." The tall girl obediently followed Abigail into the room, and the other servants in the hall dispersed, each going about their work, leaving Kanye standing there in a daze. The girl had already changed into a gray maid's uniform, kneeling on the bathroom floor, scrubbing the wooden cabinet. Kanye stood at the door, stunned, watching as the girl worked diligently, her technique quite skillful. In no time, she had made the difficult-to-clean bathroom neat and tidy. Kenyi was even more puzzled. This didn't seem like Carol's style. In the past, at Carol's place, clothes were always strewn about, the sofa and windowsills littered with cigarette butts and tin cans, and the pantry always exuded a musty smell. Every time she went there, she would first help Carol clean up for a while the golden-haired beauty casually wandered around, enjoying the warm milk and bread she had just brought. "Are you really not Carol?" Kenyi murmured. "Miss, what are you talking about?" The tall girl looked confused, her bright blue eyes blinking rapidly. "Ross, get back to work." Maid Abigail called from upstairs, and the girl quickly bent down to continue her tasks. Abigail came down a few steps and said to Kenyi, "Miss Gianna, you should go back to your room, it's wet everywhere, and it will dirty your clothes." She looked up at the middle-aged, slightly plump maid. This time, upon returning to the house, Abigail's attitude had become very polite. Not just Abigail, but the other servants, the cooks, and even the guards and patrolling soldiers treated her differently than before. During dinner, Kenyi instinctively kept her eyes on the new girl. Her demeanor seemed a bit awkward as she focused on her own food, not talking to anyone, even though her beautiful appearance had attracted quite a few male servants who came over to flirt with her one after another. Kenyi no longer wanted to follow this girl around, asking her if she was really Carol. Although they looked very similar, her inner doubts remained unresolved. Perhaps they were just two people who looked alike. Carol had a proud demeanor but was filled with passion inside, while this girl always seemed indifferent, responding to her questions with a dull, "What are you talking about? I don't know that person." But Kenyi still couldn't help but sit on the sofa in the living room, observing the tall brown-haired maid who was tidying up the coat rack by the door. The yard was a bit noisy. Kenyi turned to look out the window and saw that he had returned quite early today. Just as she was about to jump up from the sofa and escape to the basement, he was about to push open the front door and enter the hall. She stood there behind the sofa, unsure whether to go or stay. She had thought he would only return early on weekends, otherwise, he always arrived at the house at midnight. Behind him was an aide, the same man who had waited outside the bedroom for a report that day. She couldn't see the aide's face clearly, only that he was dressed in a black uniform and had a very upright posture. He glanced at Kenyi from a distance, his icy blue eyes sweeping over the tall brown-haired maid standing by the coat rack. This beautiful face was unfamiliar to him. He asked, "Are you new here?" "My name is Ross. I've only been here for less than a week, General." The girl with bright blue eyes looked straight at him, a hint of a shy smile on her rosy lips as she took his hat and gracefully turned to hang it on the coat rack. He didn't speak to the beautiful maid again, walking straight into the hall. Kenyi stood behind the sofa, and he didn't look at her again but quickly ascended the stairs. Kenyi let out a sigh of relief, only to hear his footsteps stop. He stood at the corner of the second floor and called down, Go to Abigail and get my clean clothes, and bring them in." Kenyi immediately tensed up, quickly raising her eyes to the staircase, only to see that his gaze hadn't landed on her. He smiled at the new tall maid still standing by the coat rack and accurately called her name, Ross. "Okay, General." The tall brown-haired maid responded promptly and clearly. His icy blue eyes trembled slightly as he turned and pushed open the door to his room. "Miss Gianna, I'm very sorry, but Abigail is out on an errand. Could you please tell me where the clothes are?" The tall brown-haired maid spoke to her for the first time, taking the initiative. The clean clothes should be in the storage room." Kenyi knew he had too many clothes, and a new maid might really not be able to distinguish how those towering wardrobes were categorized. If she had to check each wardrobe, it would probably take over an hour. Or, "I'll help you look for them." "Then, thank you, Miss Gianna. But, you have to take them to him," Kenyi murmured as a supplement. "Of course." The tall brown-haired maid smiled cheerfully, seemingly unaware that this would be a dangerous task. "Clean clothes." Kenyi squatted down and opened the bottom cabinet. She remembered that the usual clothes were kept in this area. After searching for a long time, she couldn't find what he wanted but instead came across some other garments. She simply rummaged through all the cabinets below but still didn't find them. She began to expand her search, looking through the middle cabinets. "Ross, your movements are really slow, I can't wait any longer," his slightly hoarse voice suddenly rang out above her head. Kenyi felt her head buzz, as if it were about to explode. She cautiously turned her head and saw him standing at the door. He hadn't expected that the girl kneeling on the storage room floor, amidst a pile of clothes, was not the tall, beautiful, brown-haired Ross, but her. He was also somewhat confused, standing at the door looking at her. She seemed to have heard something she shouldn't have, like a rat trying to scurry away, clutching a pile of clothes and wanting to slip past him. However, she accidentally tripped over a pile of long boots, almost falling to the floor. She struggled to steady herself, picked up another pile of clothes from the ground, and squeezed past him. He glanced at the mess she had made in the storage room and then looked at her panicked retreating figure. She had clearly forgotten one thing: these clothes were originally meant for him. This afternoon, her reaction in the storage room made him want to laugh. He exerted a lot of effort to suppress the smile on his face, but he had already laughed out loud several times in his heart. At midnight, during this special moment, he quietly walked down the stairs into the basement corridor. To be honest, he was a bit jealous of that guy Philip. Why could his Eastern companion smile brightly while linking arms with him, while she always seemed like a prisoner, pushed along by him? Even though he had never compromised with anyone, no one had ever been named on his list. Despite her righteous refusal, before leaving tonight, he still wanted to see her one more time. He repeated the familiar lock opening motion, gently turning the key, only to be surprised to find that the room door was not locked. He gently pushed open the iron door, and a smile immediately froze on his face. Because she was sitting upright on the bed, her pair of pitch-black eyes staring at him in the dark. It must have been his footsteps that weren't light enough, waking her up. For a moment, he thought this, just as he was about to confidently speak, using the words he had prepared in advance to gloss over this sudden intrusion. But she spoke first, cold and unfeeling, shattering his self-deceptive fantasies. This time her tone was somewhat agitated. "You don't need to do this. No need to pretend. Even if you let that Jewish girl go, give her money to go home, I wouldn't think of you as a philanthropist. You also don't need to spend 10 hours every night like a truck driver, shuttling between that city and this house. Even less do you need to take me to listen to Nessun Dorma from Turandot just because I've read Puccini's script. You will never truly understand the meaning of that play." He pointed at her, his fingertip trembling slightly, and in 2 steps, reached the side of the bed, sternly shouting, "Enough! Stupid woman, are you looking for death?" Without waiting for her to retort, the black figure lunged at her like a wolf pouncing on its prey, agilely and accurately pinning her down on the bed, his hands gripping her slender neck. His hands tightened around her throat, her neck bones looked so fragile as if they would snap with a twist. Ignoring her pained expression, he gradually increased the pressure as if everything had fallen into a strange loop. He treated her well, but she not only didn't appreciate it but also tried to provoke him. He abused her, and her silent resistance further enraged him, forcing him to torment her even more. He had been trying to change all of this, but she always led him to jump into the loop. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape. She closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. The grip on her throat made it hard for her to breathe. She had mentally prepared herself to face his brutality, but just when it was about to come, she still couldn't help but shrink back, shivering in fear. Just like last night, after returning from the concert, she had deliberately provoked him. Just as he was about to conquer her, she had begged for mercy. Suddenly, the hand gripping her throat loosened. His fingertips brushed against the warm tears on her cheek, then slowly slid down her tender face, gliding over her soft lips, caressing her jaw and neck. He left her, quietly exiting her room. Everything was so silent, as if he had never been there. The iron door to the basement was slightly ajar, and a sliver of warm yellow light seeped in from outside. "Wah!" she cried out loud, thinking that by saying this, by ruthlessly exposing him, he would unleash his beastly nature, violate her, and abuse her, which wouldn't make her soul feel so painful and conflicted. It was as if he had been scalded by her tears, seemingly trying hard to suppress his anger, silently exiting her room, just because he didn't want to see her cry. She looked towards the low windowsill. In the night, the car started, heading down that familiar old road. The empty windowsill became unclear in her eyes, as her tears had blurred her vision. Her tactic indeed worked, he no longer set foot in her room, although he still returned to the house every night. She had never intended to provoke him and was glad for the peace, but the atmosphere had been too quiet these past few days. She even began to suspect that his interest had shifted to the new beautiful maid, as he had called her into his room several times, and it was a long while before she emerged. Kanye couldn't help but feel a bit sympathetic towards the girl. She looked so restrained, awkward, obedient, and pure. How could she possibly deal with someone as cunning and scheming as him? This time, Kanye saw the new tall and beautiful maid, her pale face unusually flushed, rushing down the stairs from the second floor in disarray, bursting into the shared restroom on the first floor. Kanye took a few steps forward but did not enter the restroom, instead hearing the sound of running water inside. After quite a while, the maid finally came out, a hint of uncontainable panic still lingering in her blue eyes. As Kanye locked eyes with those blue eyes, a charming smile floated around the rose-red lips, and she opened her mouth to emit a voice as elastic as a Persian cat. "Gianna, my pure little angel, we meet again." "Irina. Is that you?" The maid, breaking from her usual reserved demeanor, made Kanye a bit suspicious, and the question she had repeated several times without a response slipped out again. "If it's not me, who else could it be?" She smiled even more brightly, her lips curling. Kanye grabbed her arm and exclaimed, "It really is you. Why are you dressed as a maid? And pretending not to know me? By the way, how did you end up here? Weren't you at Samuel Art School? Has my brother been released? How are the teachers at the school? Have the SS and the police been bothering them again?" She bombarded her with questions, and Irina maintained her smile throughout. At that moment, Kanye gradually realized a fact: Irina's background was definitely not as simple as she had imagined. "Irina, who exactly are you?" "Gianna, I didn't mean to deceive you. You know, those days at the art school were quite happy. I considered you my only confidant." She pulled Kanye's shoulder, guiding her to sit down, gazing into her dark, sparkling eyes as she continued, "Friends should be able to talk about anything, but you have kept quite a few secrets from me, haven't you? You never mentioned your relationship with the owner of this house, the SS General Ryan." Under her gaze, Kanye lowered her head and said softly, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to deceive you, I just didn't want to bring it up. I escaped, I managed to flee from this house. That day, I ran for a full 4 hours in the snow. Later, I was rescued by the organization responsible for relocating refugees, which is how I ended up in that country. At the art school, I just wanted to live quietly. I haven't told anyone about those things, not even my brother." As she spoke, tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. All right, don't cry." Irina tore off a piece of tissue to wipe her tears, softly comforting her, "That's all in the past. Isn't he treating you well now?" "Treatment? Let's not talk about that. How did you end up here?" She blinked her dark eyes at the brown-haired, blue-eyed woman. Although she wasn't as charming as when she had golden hair, she was still so enchanting and beautiful. You should be able to guess my identity. Irina looked at her with sapphire-like eyes. Kanye understood her gaze and nodded, not pressing her for her identity, but she couldn't help but worry about her friend's situation. Irina, what you're doing is very dangerous. You need to be careful. I have a feeling he is not an easy person to deal with. Let's talk about that later. Will you tell anyone about my identity? Of course not. Irina, ah. Kanye quickly covered her mouth and corrected herself, I mean, Ross. With that, I feel a bit more at ease. Just as you said, he is indeed a formidable character. Irina said, raising her beautiful eyebrows. I have a question that I don't know if I should ask. Kanye spoke very softly, her cheeks slightly flushed. What is it? Just now, you came out of his room looking a bit flustered. Did he force you to do something? Humph, if that were the case, it would be easier to say. I'm not afraid of dealing with those lecherous and rogue types, Irina said, pulling the corners of her mouth into a charming smile. But the truth is quite the opposite, Gianna. He didn't make me do anything at all, and that's the most difficult part. Did he really do nothing? Kanye thought to herself, having just seen Irina rush into the restroom in disarray. She furrowed her dark brows, pursed her lips, and chose not to ask further, as it seemed not her place to concern herself with such matters. After revealing her identity, Irina did not ask her to do anything, only hoping she could keep the secret. But Kanye couldn't help but pay attention to the movements of this special friend with a significant mission. Although she couldn't help her much, at least she could keep a close watch on the enemy's movements. Just now, she had seen his car start from the basement. He had already left the house, and she didn't know where he had gone, perhaps heading to a base hundreds of kilometers away. Kanye wanted to tell Irina about this, but as she stepped into the hall, she saw a tall figure darting down the corridor like a cat. She quickened her pace to follow. Turning a corner, the figure had already vanished. All she could see were the other rooms along the corridor, their doors half ajar, except for the guest room, which was completely closed. She tentatively pushed open the door to that room. The sight before her stunned her. There was indeed a person inside, but it was not her friend Irina, but a long, narrow, shadowy figure like a ghost. She froze in place, her mind somewhat stiff. She had clearly seen his car drive out of the yard just moments ago, but how could he still be in this house? He sat there alive and well behind a narrow black poplar wood desk, the room filled with thin smoke that made her cough. She wanted to escape this place but couldn't find a reason, so she awkwardly said, "I'm sorry, I must have walked into the wrong room. Shouldn't you knock before entering a room?" He lifted his ice blue eyes and glanced at her, sitting in his chair and asking in a low voice. In the past, when he entered her room in the attic, he always did so uninvited. Now, every midnight, he also entered her room without knocking, using a key to unlock her door. When he invaded her space, had he ever considered her feelings? "I'm sorry," this time, she truly felt she had been rude, so she decided to apologize. Kanye turned her head, not allowing him to notice her wavering gaze. In reality, she was searching for Irina, a secret agent lurking in this house. Although she didn't know what Irina was up to, she was her friend, and she felt obligated to keep her identity a secret and protect her. "Since you consider yourself the master here, there's no need to apologize." He chuckled lightly. Kanye didn't understand the meaning behind his words. She looked up and saw that he appeared to have drunk a lot, his black uniform jacket draped over him like a blanket, all the buttons undone, his shirt buttons also undone, with some dampness on his chest, his golden hair disheveled, yet those ice blue eyes were so clear. Meeting those eyes again, Kanye felt an inexplicable panic. She knew that no matter what purpose Irina's appearance served, it was definitely aimed at him. She averted her gaze from that cold, piercing look, her eyes inadvertently falling on the table in front of him. Although he reeked of alcohol, there was no alcohol on the table, nor any signs of disorder. Instead, in one corner of the table, there was a neatly arranged stack of documents. From the various colored fonts on top, she could tell it was a list. He held a stack of paper in his hand, using a lighter to burn this thick pile of densely written names. The red flames quickly ignited the paper in his hand, the blue inner flames consuming those names, and soon they were reduced to deep black ash. His ice blue eyes remained fixed on the burning paper, and suddenly, a gust of wind blew open the window, sending the ashes swirling like snowflakes. He sat amidst the falling black flakes, a cruel smile appearing at the corners of his red lips. Kanye suddenly realized the significance of the list he had burned to ashes. Each name on that densely packed paper represented a living life. She watched as the black snow fell to the ground, on the table, on the bookshelf, on his straight shoulders, on his sleeves, and even in his golden hair. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably, mourning for those innocent souls who had died unjustly. His cold, ice-blue eyes bore into her, and he spoke slowly, "My dear, you are truly an angel. You could exchange your body for their lives, you are saving people with your body. What a noble act! But how many have you saved? 12 insignificant teachers? Your colleagues and friends, your cousin, and 2 strangers you casually mentioned? Not a single person has had the courage to fabricate lies so blatantly in front of me, no one has ever done that." Her heart seemed to stop suddenly. He had long seen through her secret. The last 2 names were indeed fabricated on the spot. She didn't have time to think about why he didn't expose her on the spot but waited until now to say such a thing. A question filled with righteous indignation escaped her lips. "You killed so many innocent people. All of this is the evil you have committed. Don't you fear going to hell after death? Evil deeds? You're not wrong. Do you want to know what evil is? He lowered his gaze, seemingly surveying the scattered ashes of paper in the room, then raised his long fingers to gently brush off the black ash from his sleeve. I don't care about their lives or deaths. Yes, 3147, to me, that's just a number. Perhaps this number isn't very accurate, as some bodies were burned beyond recognition. I don't care about that. What I care about are those trained soldiers of the Empire, the recoil of the guns shaking their strong shoulders, covered in blood blisters, losing consciousness because they have to keep firing, keep firing. Kenyi was stunned by his words, her eyes wide open, staring at him. She saw his ice blue eyes blink a few times as he continued, not just the soldiers, the administrators are also troubled because the applications to go to the front line are piling up on their desks. Yes, because facing the front line means confronting cold death and brutal enemies, not these defenseless women, the elderly, middle-aged women, children, and young girls like you. Just by looking at their appearance, it's already hard to tell their age. They all wear the same striped clothes, their hair completely shaved off, made into blankets and mats along with the wool, and then distributed to prisoners. Truly making the most of resources, isn't it? He ignored her horrified and furious expression, keeping his head down as he continued his monologue. The commander doesn't allow unmarried soldiers to do this. Those boys, upon seeing this, never want to touch women again. If they don't touch women, then the Empire's army will have no successors. A commander of an empire, actually fainting from his own orders, what a huge joke. But no one can stop it, not even him, because everyone is just a small part of this gigantic machine. The Führer and the commander are its brain, I am its eyes and tentacles. As for those soldiers ordered to fire, they might just be a small screw. If any part rusts, it will be immediately replaced and thrown into the trash. He finally stopped his lengthy monologue, his long fingers sliding over a large cross medal he had just taken off his uniform collar. What did you just say? Hell? Hell is not in the underworld, it is right here on earth. True evil is not the glory paved with bones, nor the brilliance forged with blood, but in this world of chaos and beasts, being human yet completely unaware of what to believe in. Her eyes were already filled with chaotic tears, her vision blurred, and she choked out, "You chose the wrong belief yourself, you can't blame others." He suddenly lifted his head, meeting her gaze, and let out a long, cold laugh. "Your little mouth is truly venomous, just like your gaze. You always stab me with your dark eyes." He raised his arm, pointing at the tip of her nose, then pressed his palm against his left chest. "But I still have to thank you, it's you who makes my heart ache, and it is this pain that makes me clearly feel that I am still alive." His hand tightly gripped the fabric of his chest, his nails digging into his flesh, as if his heart were truly enduring intense pain. Kenyi lowered her head, not daring to look into those ice-blue depths again. His eyes were like the sea in winter, calm on the surface but turbulent beneath. She was a small boat, swaying uncertainly in the storm, ready to capsize at any moment. This time, it was he who took the initiative to let her off the hook. "My angel, go back to your basement. I want to be alone for a while." He scoffed disdainfully, yet his hand remained pressed against his chest, showing no sign of relaxation. Kanye walked into the basement room in a daze. In the darkness, she couldn't see a woman sitting on her bed. The woman softly called her name, Gianna. "Irina, it's you." Kanye was startled and finally came to her senses. "What are you doing here? I thought you went to the room on the second floor, looking for something." "Looking for something? What do you mean?" Irina asked sensitively. The list." "Are you looking for the list of victims?" That list was burned, black ashes scattered everywhere. As Kanye spoke, her arm lifted, fingers spread in the air. The recent scene was too shocking, leaving her thoughts lingering in it, unable to shake off that moment. Those ice blue eyes pierced through the black snowflakes, shooting towards her. How could he speak of extreme evil in such a calm and elegant tone? "Gianna, are you okay?" Irina supported her shoulder, helping her sit steadily on the bed. "Tell me, what did you see?" "They're killing people." "Why are they doing this?" "They're actually murdering innocent women and children." Kanye's voice was a bit agitated. "Gianna, my job and mission are to do everything I can to stop these evils, to eradicate these inhuman forces. Only by completely eliminating them can people live peaceful lives." Irina held her frail shoulder, watching her closely. For the first time, Kanye saw a determined and resolute light in those blue eyes. "Gianna, can I trust you?" Kanye didn't understand what Irina wanted to do, but the next words made her shiver involuntarily. "I'm not here for the list. I'm here for his life. Looking at it now, it's hard to accomplish this task alone. I need your help." "You want me to kill him?" Her black eyes widened, shaking her head. "No, I don't want to kill anyone. Doesn't he deserve to die?" "Gianna, don't forget, you're a Red Cross nurse, a member of the International Humanitarian Rescue Team. You've seen the horrors in that concentration camp with your own eyes and heard their evil deeds with your own ears. He's a devil. How can you be soft-hearted towards such a person?" Kanye felt exposed under her gaze. "But I'm just a prisoner. What can I do? Isn't that diamond necklace enough to explain this?" "Gianna, you may not admit it, but you know in your heart that he loves you. At other times, he might flirt with other women, but right now, he doesn't even have that mood. His eyes can't accommodate any other woman because he loves you deeply. He can even reveal his heart to you. He trusts you, likes you, and tries to please you, so naturally, he won't guard against you." Kanye broke free from her hand and shouted at her, "Yes, even if what you said is true, what does it matter? I can't kill him." She realized she had spoken too loudly, covering her mouth, quickly blinking her black eyes, looking at Irina. "You don't need to worry about that. I have a way." Irina pulled out a small capsule from somewhere, pinching it gently between two fingers, and held it out in front of Kanye. "Be careful with this, it's a chemically synthesized poison." Kanye trembled as she took it, holding it in her palm. It was a tiny transparent capsule filled with white powder. "This poison will dissolve immediately in water, but it will only take effect fatally if added to the cup within 1 minute before someone drinks it. So the person doing this must be able to get very close to him, someone who is by his side. You want me to poison him?" Kanye's voice trembled, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. "He's very cautious. When his trusted Abigail and a few old servants are not around, he won't touch any food or water sent by outsiders. Clearly, he has some suspicion of me and has deliberately tested me several times. I don't know what he has discerned from my reactions, but we can't delay any longer." She added seriously, "If we fail, we won't lose anything. If we succeed, I can complete my mission, and you can gain your freedom." Kanye steadied herself, gripping the capsule in her fist, murmuring, "But what should I do, during dinner tonight? Look for an opportunity to act." Irina revealed a charming smile. She returned to her docile and wooden demeanor, silently setting the dining table with the servants. Kanye sat on the sofa, her dark eyes fixed on Irina's every move. Footsteps sounded as he came down the stairs, walking straight to the dining table and sitting in the large black chair. Clearly, his mood wasn't very good. He casually picked up a lighter from the table and lit a cigarette. Kanye pulled out a chair and sat beside him. He seemed surprised by her arrival and actions, not asking anything, just glancing at her before lowering his gaze, continuing to puff smoke rings, as if lost in thought. The servants laid out napkins and utensils for her as well. Kanye's hand rested on the white napkin as she nodded in thanks to the male servant. "Everything is ready, please enjoy." The male servant bowed humbly. Kanye sat up straight, her palms already soaked with sweat. The small white capsule was in her pocket. She couldn't help but touch it with her fingertip, then quickly withdrew it. With so many people present, it was impossible to act. She bit her lip, feeling extremely nervous. "Albert, you and everyone else go downstairs." He turned his head and said to the leading male servant. A row of servants retreated, and Irina walked past her with a blank expression. Kanye didn't dare to look up at her, but in her panic, his gaze caught her. "What do you want to say?" His ice blue eyes seemed to magnetically draw her gaze, and she met his eyes for less than a second before lowering her head, breathing rapidly, sweat beading on her forehead. Kanye thought her performance must be terrible, but unexpectedly, he spoke, his tone unusually gentle. "Were you scared by what you saw and heard in my room this afternoon?" She remained silent, lowering her head, but she could feel his gaze continuing to sweep across her face, like a sea blue net capturing her wavering focus. She had nowhere to hide, so she mustered her courage to meet his eyes again, only to be stunned once more. She hadn't expected to see such a gentle light flickering in his eyes. He gazed at her intently, revealing a very slight smile, almost imperceptible. "Let's have dinner and not mention that matter again." After saying this, he extinguished his cigarette, picked up his knife and fork, then paused as if remembering something. "I would like to have a little more wine, is that okay?" She stood up and went to the wine cabinet, took out a bottle of red wine, opened it, and filled his glass. "This wine seems to be poured a bit too full." He took the high-stemmed glass in front of her, poured half of it out, and placed it back in front of her. "Drink with me. You've actually had quite a bit already." Her hand rested on the glass as she replied somewhat off-topic. "Do I look like someone with such a low tolerance for alcohol?" He didn't wait for her to lift her glass, instead raising his own, gesturing to her, and downed the red wine in one go, then filled his glass again. Kanye looked at him. Just now, he had said the wine was poured too full, and now he had filled his glass again. She heard him slowly say, "Wine won't make me drunk, the only thing that can make me drunk is you." After saying this, he drank down the wine again. Kanye was puzzled as to why he kept drinking glass after glass without touching the food in front of him. Soon, only half a glass remained in front of her. "Can you bring me another bottle? Today's wine tastes good," he said. She stood up again, went to the wine cabinet, preparing to open another bottle. This time, she thought of the small pill in her pocket. This might be the best opportunity of the night. As she thought of this, her hands couldn't help but tremble, her mind almost unable to think, mechanically following Irina's instructions step by step. The small capsule was thus dropped into the red wine at the moment she pulled out the cork. It dissolved instantly. Everything seemed to be happening quietly. He, with his back to the wine cabinet, was clearly a bit tipsy, one hand supporting his forehead, his eyes tightly closed. The sly Irina was hiding in the dark at the entrance of the living room, closely watching her movements. Kanye picked up the bottle of wine and walked step by step towards the dining table. He smiled at her, seeing her obediently standing in front of him, preparing to pour wine into his glass. His ice blue eyes gazed up at her jade-like profile. He gently raised his arm, resting it on her slender waist, pulling her towards him with a bit of force. She trembled, and the wine bottle slipped from her hands. With a loud crash, the entire bottle shattered on the floor. She immediately jumped up, seeing the scarlet wine splattered everywhere, along with scattered glass shards. "Did you get hurt?" He immediately grasped her hand, feeling her small hand and entire body trembling. He released her. "I'm really sorry, I might be a bit drunk." She wanted to bend down to pick up the large piece of glass but was stopped by him. She fled the hall and went to the kitchen, where Irina was standing. "I'm sorry, I can't do it. Even if I know he's a heinous devil, I still can't do it. Gianna, do you know how many lives your mercy will cost? There's no time for nonsense now, we need to change the plan. She stared at her tightly, saying sternly, this time, you don't need to intervene. Just keep your mouth shut and remain silent. Is it you? Ross, my head feels a bit dizzy. His hand supported his forehead, eyes tightly closed, veins visible near his temples. Perhaps it's because you've had too much to drink. You should go back to your room and rest for a while. Irina supported him as they walked up the stairs. Kanye couldn't help but follow, standing at the door of the second-floor bedroom, watching Irina help the unsteady man onto the bed. He lay down fully clothed, eyes closed, golden hair spread across the white pillow, seemingly already deep in sleep. Irina then slowly walked to the window, closing it tightly and drawing the curtains. What do you plan to do? Kanye couldn't help but ask. There are many ways to make a person die, not just poisoning. A car accident, or an unexpected fire. Are you going to set a fire? Do you want to stop me? Gianna. No, not at all. Then go back to your room. You have nothing to do here. After a while, when the fire starts, you can take the opportunity to escape. You'll be free. Haven't you always wanted freedom? Kanye didn't want to face her anymore. She didn't want to analyze whether Irina's position was right or wrong. She ran back to the basement, locked the door, but couldn't help but go to the window, where she could see the second-floor window already flickering with flames. Irina had already put her plan into action. Yes, he was a heinous devil. She watched the flames burn, knowing she could save him, but she didn't say a word, just watched everything happen, seeing the flames consume him. After a while, she heard alarms ringing in the yard. People were in a bit of a panic, gathering from afar around the house, busy extinguishing the fire. However, the fire was growing stronger, making it difficult to put out in a short time. In a daze, Kanye remembered she should escape. She pushed open the door, only to find the iron gate between the basement and the hall locked with a large black lock. She rushed over, banging on the iron bars, but the lock was very sturdy, and with her strength, it was impossible to open. The corridor was gradually filled with thick smoke, choking her into coughing. She had no choice but to return to her small room, blocking the door tightly with a bedsheet. Kanye crouched by the window and began to cry. Wasn't this the best ending? She didn't resent Irina too much, perhaps her profession required her to do this, or perhaps she was afraid of revealing her identity and action plan. Or maybe it was because she hadn't poisoned his drink as he requested. Whatever the reason, it no longer mattered, she would perish in this sea of fire. Thick smoke still seeped through the cracks into the room. The instinct to survive made her lower her body, quietly watching the world outside the low window. Did people remember some forgotten things just before death? She thought of the times she and her sisters were often punished by their father for being mischievous, of her mother combing her cloud-like black hair with a yellow wooden comb, of her brother Victor, of her classmates at the American church school. She prayed again and again for her family and friends to be safe and happy. However, what she didn't expect was that the last thing that surfaced in her heart was a pair of ice blue eyes. He would also perish in the fire. He deserved it, but why did she feel a trace of sympathy and guilt for him? Clearly, he had cruelly abused her, yet at this moment, she felt she owed him something. If on that night at the opera house, she had accepted the rose from his hand, would things have been better? If when he entered the basement, she hadn't deliberately exposed him but instead continued to lie in bed pretending to sleep, allowing him to say good night to her and leave quietly, would it have been better? If she hadn't rashly barged into his room, and when she saw his heart hovering on the edge of a dark abyss, struggling and in pain, instead of using cold words to provoke him, she had just watched him and continued to listen to him. If she didn't want to imagine what the outcome would be if all these ifs became reality. She had never dared to hope for anything, she just didn't want to owe anyone anything. Besides sympathy and guilt, there was also a deep-seated sorrow buried in her heart. She no longer had the strength to think about those things, coughing continuously until she fainted from the thick smoke. In the yard, amidst the flickering firelight, 2 armed sergeants were escorting a struggling woman. One of the soldiers kicked her hard on the leg, causing her to kneel on the ground, crawling before him. He leaned down slightly, using his long fingers clad in white gloves to push aside her messy brown hair, revealing her face. Her features were exquisite and beautiful, especially her pair of soul-stirring eyes. He sneered, "My little cat, we finally meet." The woman returned his sneer, her sapphire blue eyes devoid of fear. "Ryan, you beast in human skin, this time you win, but unfortunately, you will gain nothing from me." As she spoke, her pupils suddenly constricted, a hint of smugness curling her lips. Just as she was about to execute her final plan, he swiftly seized her throat, his movements as agile as a wolf. Ugh! Her jaw could not close, her brows tightly furrowed, glaring at him from the side, her mouth forced open in an O shape by his grip, unable to utter a single syllable. He threw her to the ground with precise and brutal force, deliberately letting her forehead hit the hard surface, blood gushing forth. She felt a wave of dizziness, her vision blurring, her ears buzzing, only hearing his ghostly voice above her. When did the docile Persian cat turn into a beautiful snake? Someone, pull out her venomous fangs for me, he said to the 2 sergeants, who wasted no time in following his orders. He dusted off the dirt from his white gloves, turning to the adjutant standing beside him, saying, "It seems this woman really has something valuable hidden in her mind." His brows slightly furrowed as he turned away, no longer watching his subordinates as they used pliers to forcibly extract her teeth one by one. Her ice blue eyes gazed towards the house illuminated by the flickering flames, where firefighters were desperately trying to extinguish the fire. But the blaze was fierce, having already consumed most of the rooms from the first to the second floor, the crimson flames lighting up the dark night as if it were day. The woman spat a mouthful of bloodied saliva at him, the ground littered with her white, blood-stained broken teeth. Despairing, she hissed, "You beast in human skin, you kill without mercy, your sins are countless, you are destined for hell. Can you say something new, my little cat? I've heard that too many times." He elegantly turned around, his red lips curling into a smile. The woman's eyes widened, staring at him intently, her hair disheveled, her lips smeared with bright red blood. The loss of her teeth made her appearance even more terrifying and ferocious. She let out a piercing laugh. "How many loved ones have you torn apart? How many innocents have died unjustly? It's time, ha ha ha." She threw her head back and laughed loudly, as if she were a born madwoman. He stared at her, suddenly understanding something from her expression, his eagle-like sharp eyes narrowing in realization. "Now, you will taste the bitterness of losing a loved one." The woman laughed and shouted, "You scheme and flatter. She will never love you, because you are not human. Not only does she not love you, she wants to kill you. She wishes she could tear you to pieces. How ridiculous, pitiful, and sad. The dark hand of your conspiracy has personally buried your humble love." He did not finish listening to her words, for his slender black figure had already merged into the crimson sea of flames. She trembled uncontrollably, her body soaked in cold water, the black long coat wrapped around her was also drenched, heavy and burdensome. She covered her mouth with her hands, still coughing incessantly. "This is not a fire, it is arson. That beautiful maid is not a servant, she is a spy. Carol and Ross are aliases, her real name is Amanda. However, this cunning Persian cat cannot escape the sharp eyes of the mountain eagle. I think you know all of this very well." He looked down at her, and she stopped coughing, still shivering, her dark eyes somewhat hollow, her pale lips seemingly frozen with a layer of ice. "How does it feel, my angel? Is it pleasant to be betrayed?" His tone was low, as if saying this made him uncomfortable. She finally broke her silence, quickly blinking her black eyes, lowering her head to say, "I do not blame her, she had no choice but to do this. You are truly magnanimous, kind to everyone but cruel to me." He gently brushed his fingers through her matted black hair stuck to her forehead, pushing the messy strands aside, a hint of disdain in his smile. "I know you wish for my death. In fact, even if you truly poisoned my cup, I would understand." He still smiled, but could no longer hide the sorrow and pain in his words. His words were like a rusty dull knife, grinding against her heart. She could not endure this torturous torment. A series of counterattacks erupted from her like a volcano. "Why did you save me? Why not let me burn to death in the basement? Yes, I did not poison your cup, I deliberately shattered that bottle of wine, but it was not out of sympathy for you or anything else. I just didn't want to have blood on my hands, to become a devil like you. I watched her plot against you, in fact, I always knew. But I just watched you die, enough. I told you, your life is mine, only I have the right to end it. He said coldly, his gaze suddenly deepening, staring directly at her. This time, she did not look away from his gaze, nor did she evade his touch. Her dark eyes met his directly, and for a moment, her world was filled only with those ice-blue eyes. The distant house still flickered with red flames, her gaze pierced through the transparent air separating them, reaching directly into the depths of his clear eyes. His tone was slow and solemn, each word pronounced clearly. However, I also want to know, if I really die, will you shed a tear for me? His thumb brushed against her warm cheek, the tear stains beneath her beautiful eyes still wet. She could feel the warmth of his fingers, suddenly realizing that she was just a girl, an ordinary girl. The man before her, aside from his godlike beauty and unfathomable heart, was essentially just a man who usually stood high above but at this moment was humbly yearning for a response, knowing she betrayed and cursed him, yet still would risk everything to save her. The defenses in her heart crumbled rapidly, allowing the surging emotions to flood over her reason like a torrent. At the same time, hot tears burst from her eyes, falling onto his fingers. He carefully withdrew his hand from her face, watching the crystalline tears that clung to his fingertips. "All right, enough, this is too much." He chuckled softly, clenched his fist, and turned to walk away step by step. Watching his retreating figure, Kanye bit her lip tightly, a metallic sweetness gradually filling her mouth. Her lower lip was bitten open by her own teeth, and she could not bring herself to say those words, "I'm not crying for you." People were busy extinguishing the fire, and by dawn, the flames were finally under control. Kanye, curled up on the grass with a mat and wrapped in a cotton quilt, was awakened by an officer and taken to the car. Before long, he entered the driver's cabin, wearing a black uniform coat over a black cloak, which was covered in dust, clearly a sign of his frantic efforts to command the firefighting efforts, making him appear somewhat disheveled, a stark contrast to his usual neatness. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. He glanced at her and whispered, "To a place I've long wanted to take you." With that, he inserted the key into the ignition with his left hand, started the engine, and with some effort, turned the steering wheel with one hand. She caught a glimpse of him in the rear-view mirror. He was steering with one hand, while his right arm was wrapped in a blood-soaked bandage. She guessed the injury was serious, as his right arm could barely move. It must have been sustained last night when he broke through the iron gate to save her. Yet, he insisted on driving himself, which suggested there was something he wasn't telling her. "We'll be on mountain roads from here," he said, parking the car in a clearing by the woods before getting out. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.